ahead and get started in the interest of everyone's time. Welcome to the PHLpreK FY 2024 desk review orientation. You were all notified earlier last week that you were selected for a desk review. So thanks for joining us today. I'm Carrie Lee. I'm the contract manager for the PHLpreK intermediary at PHMC. Helping me through this presentation is Ken Perry, our accounting manager at PHMC, and also Theo Margulies, our PHLpreK contracts coordinator. And then you'll also hear from representative from Spark about the resources available at the end. Okay, the purpose of this orientation is to review FY24 desk review expectations and deliverables outlined in the PHLpreK contract. We'll clarify documents that you need to submit and the process in general that you need to submit in the desk review, and then also provide some resources at the end. I mean, you can get help now if needed. So our agenda today, we'll first go over the desk review. We'll give an overview of the whole process. We'll talk through general ledgers. We'll talk through other supporting documentation you'll need to submit. And then we'll talk about after you submit, the next steps will be getting your desk review report, and then also again about the resources. So who receives a desk review? So as stated in your PHLpreK contract, PHMC conducts a desk review on a 10% sample of providers receiving less than $300,000 in organizational receipt of PHLpreK funds, and also providers with identified fiscal concerns. The desk review reviews your general ledger and supporting documentation. It verifies that purchases and payments are in accordance with PHLpreK contract, the PHLpreK contract, and with established laws and regulations. Also requests your accounting policy, procedures, and other financial documents. So here's an overview of the process. And we'll talk through like each of these steps in a little more detail and the documents in more detail in the coming slides. But this is just a broad overview of what's going to happen in a desk review. So again, we notify providers were selected for the desk review last week and requested your general ledger that details PHLpreK revenue and expenses for that reporting period. This should be pulled directly from your accounting software and is due on August 20th. So after you submit this, our finance team will review your general ledger and select around 50 transactions that you'll need to submit supporting documentation for. We'll send you these transactions back and then request you to submit that supporting documentation along with some other financial documentation that we'll go through. That deadline after we make the request, it will be 2 weeks from that request date. After you submit all your supporting documentation, the finance team will be reviewing your documentation and may follow up with some additional questions. When they're done with that, they'll draft your desk review report by around spring of 2025. And we'll set up meetings with each of you to really go through your report and go through the findings of your report if there are any. If you do have findings, there also may be corrective action or additional fiscal monitoring may be implemented. So our PHMC review, as I just mentioned, will review your general ledger, verify that PHLpreK expenses are clearly identified. Again, we select that sample of transaction and request supporting documentation. Verify the provider has appropriate insurance and up to date on taxes. And then also look at verifying procedures around expenditures, allocations, payroll, accounts payable, credit cards, petty cash, gift card, accounting policies and procedures, and a conflict of interest. And we'll have a list of all the documents you'll need to submit in the coming slides. All right, now I will pass it over to Ken to talk through general ledgers.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. I'm not sure, you know, the sizes of you guys in general, but basically, the general ledger is the historical document that tells us how every single transaction that you processed was handled. And every single line in your general ledger should, I shouldn't even say should, must have supporting documentation so that somebody can go, you said you charged X amount, so we should be able to get to the receipts, the checks, the credit card disbursement. Hold on for 1 second. Rashawn and Siani, could you just have your discussion one-on-one because you keep popping up while I'm trying to read? Um, by the way, Carrie, they're still having trouble signing in. Um, the um, what we expect is to be able to tell how you handled everything. Good general ledgers, well, we can go to the next slide, and I think we'll start to be able to have that discussion. This is an effective general ledger. This happens to be an innocuous one, but as you can see, they have clear descriptions. We know when things happen. We can see consistency in coding. And by consistency of coding, it means that you didn't charge milk to supplies 1 week and to meals the next week. You know, that we can see that you're consistent with those sort of things. The ability to go back and find out specific details. This should be, your general ledger should be able to lead us back to where we need to be. Can we go to the next slide, please? Um, general ledgers will take different looks depending on how you set up your accounting system. But these are the basic essentials. Got to have a date, should say a transaction type, the name of the vendor or the person in charge of the transaction, a detailed description of it, what account you did, and if in fact you had an expenditure that part of the expenditure went to one program and part of it to another, should be able to tell what that split is and what the amount is that's being charged in total and how much is being charged to Philly Pre-K. Next, please. Confusing general ledgers. This is an example of one. If someone looks at this, there's nothing really detailed that we know about this. We can't tell. You say wages, we don't know when the wages were paid. We don't know what document to go back to. We don't know how much is for Philly Pre-K, whatever. It's just a very nebulous thing. So we're looking for as clear a document as possible. Next, please. Um, there are, I'm, we put this in here because it seems like the accounting software of choice is QuickBooks. So it's very simple to pull a general ledger out of QuickBooks in a Excel format. And once you're inside, it's, you know, these are the steps. You just follow them. It's really, really simple to do. Next, thank you. I think Carrie and Theo are going to have to talk to this form.
Yes. Yeah. So now I will go over the general ledger submission form, which is how you will submit your general ledger. Okay, so this is the submission form. So when you click on the link that we've given you, it will take you here, and it has some instructions. So please complete the form to submit your general ledger. If you have a combined general ledger that includes other program revenue and expenses, please clearly mark or allocate those programs as separate from PHLpreK revenue and expenses in your general ledger. So you will choose your legal entity from a drop down, and then you will put contact information, so your first and last name, contact email, which is who we will reach out to if we have any questions about your general ledger, what accounting software you use, We ask if your general ledger was generated from your accounting software. Does it include only PHLpreK expenses, or is it an organization-wide general ledger? And then we ask, do you segregate PHLpreK expenses? And if you click yes that you do, we just ask how you do that. And then you will upload your general ledger, and you will sign, and then you will submit it.
And have
Question.
you stated in the notification that the general ledger needs to be in an Excel format?
Yes.
And if in fact that question about do you segregate, if your answer is no, we need to understand why. And then on top of that, we need to understand how do you determine the costs that are related to Philly Pre-K specifically.
Okay, so next I will be going over the supporting documentation. So here's a list of all the supporting documentation that we will request, and this will be due 2 weeks after we send the email requesting the supporting documentation. And we're going to go over each of these in more detail, but this is just a list of all of them. So the general ledger transactions, a bank account and credit card reconciliation, a check register, petty cash log, income statement and balance sheet, PA Form UC2/2A, tax form 941,
Yeah,
a payroll
hold
summary
on.
sheet.
I just want to say, Theo, that UC or 2A, that's your unemployment compensation payment documentation. Because that can be kind of nebulous and people are saying, what's that? So I just want you to know that up front.
The payroll summary sheet and register for your first payroll in June 2024. The 21st century minimum wage waiver, if applicable, workman compensation policy, certificates of insurance, a list of any credit cards distributed, a list of employees who are no longer at your program, accounting policies and procedures, and conflict of interest policy. And in this supporting documentation form, which I'm about to go over, we do ask if you have certain things. So if you don't have them, like if you don't use petty cash, you'll just be able to say no. So here is the supporting documentation submission form. And again, the supporting documentation will be due 2 weeks after we send the email requesting it. So again, you'll put your legal entity from a dropdown, your contact information, so your name and your email address, and then you will upload the supporting documentation from the transactions identified. And the next slide goes into a little bit more detail about what this is. Then we ask if you are uploading supporting documentation for all transactions, some transactions, or you don't have it for any of the transactions. If you can only upload some supporting documentation for some transactions, we just ask that you include a memo that states the specific transactions that you can't give us invoices or receipts for and a reasoning. Next, you'll upload your bank reconciliation. And then we ask if you used credit cards, checks, and petty cash. If you say no to these questions, then that's the end of the question. And if you say yes, there's drop downs of different questions. So for this credit cards, we ask who handles all credit card expendables, and then we ask that you upload your credit card reconciliation. And the same thing for checks. If you do use checks, there's some additional questions. And if you use petty cash, we ask for a petty cash log, and then just like who handles the petty cash. Then we ask for an income statement and balance sheet, the PA Form UC2/2A. We ask if you have a tax form 941. And so if you say, no, you don't have it, then that's fine. And if you do have it, then we ask that you upload it. Your payroll summary sheet and register, workman compensation policy, certificates of insurance. And then we ask if you purchased and distributed any gift cards. So if you say yes, then there's just some further questions. We ask for a list of all the gift cards. and some more specific questions about like what program pays for them, where are they kept, and who's involved. Do you have any employees who are no longer at your program? If you say yes, then we just ask for a list of employees. That includes the date of hire and the termination date. Then we ask for your accounting policies and procedures, your conflict of interest policy, and if you pay staff according to the 21st century minimum wage standard. In FY24, that was $15.71 per hour. And so you can say, yes, you do pay staff according to the minimum wage standard. And if you submitted a waiver, we just ask that you upload the waiver. And if it doesn't apply to your organization because you have less than 5 employees, then we just ask how many employees you have. Then we ask if you'd like to upload any documentation. If you say yes, that you would, you can upload as many documents as you'd like here. There's no kind of maximum. And then we ask if you've completed your submission. So if you've completed it and you've uploaded everything that you have available, you'll just sign it and submit it. If you say no, that you've uploaded maybe some things, but you're still waiting on other documents, you say no, I still need to upload more documents. You can still submit it, and we won't pull everything until you've uploaded the rest of the things you'd like to upload. Okay, so those are the 2 forms. And now I'm going to be going over just some more about the general ledger transactions. So PHMC will review your general ledger and select 50 to 75 transactions.
I want to make one comment about that. Some of the agencies that were selected this year are kind of small, and I don't think you have 50 transactions. So we will adjust accordingly to make sure that we're not trying to overwhelm you with the number of transactions we select. So for somebody that's, if let's assume that you only got $40,000 of income from us for Philly Pre-K. I'm not going to select. I'm not going to be selecting 50 transactions for that. But we will be selecting what we believe is a good representative number. But that's to be determined once we see your general ledger.
Selections may not only be PHLpreK expenses if organization-wide expenses are included. You will be asked to provide actual invoices, receipts, and evidence of management approvals for each transaction. And these kind of controls are best practices in making purchases. And as I showed you in the form, if you cannot locate invoices or receipts for some or any transactions, we just ask that you attach a memo stating the specific transaction and the reason. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Ken, and he's going to go over some documentation best practices.
Yeah. Business and personal banking and credit cards should be, hold on, I'm sorry. For some reason, everybody's blocking out my ability to read here. Should be separate. I know how easy it is for people saying, well, I'm paying for the business and I'm using my personal bank account. That is not a best practice. You should have a dedicated account for your business, and you should be making your payments through that. Benefits of using business credit cards, you can track the expenses more easily. You can establish financial cushions. Every transaction must have a receipt. And, I know how easy it is to say, it feels like it's just a scrap of paper and we just get rid of it. Because we're spending taxpayer money, we should be able to document every single thing that that money was being spent on. Consequently, keep your receipts, put the receipt together with the payment documentation, and keep them. I believe the contract calls for you keep those records for 5 years after the end of the contract. Worst case scenario, if you find yourself without a receipt, write a memo describing the transaction and explain what happened to the original document. Remember to match receipts to credit card statements and keep the supporting documentation for the general ledger. You should be able to go from the documentation to a specific line in the general ledger. Cash transactions should be kept for a minimum, to a minimum, and because it helps reduce fraud, waste, and abuse. You know, it's so easy just to reach in your pocket, say, here's $100 cash. When you use a credit card or a check, it better documents the transaction. Next, please. Documentation should be clear. You know, you don't want it smudged. It should be precise, legible. It's got to be accurate. You know, if you give me a document for $400 for something that cost 405, we're you know, that's going to just create more questions. We want to be, again, actually you can go to that next screen. You know, again, this is the kind of thing. See, you can see how easily we can see that there's a transaction out there for $1,985, and this document that we have on our screen is that document, and this is what would support that expenditure. And we would find an entry in the general ledger for that amount. Next, please. Bank accounts and credit card reconciliations. Because I'm old school, it's really hard for me to get my brain around the idea of people that don't reconcile their bank accounts. It's just, you have to reconcile your bank accounts monthly. If you, it is best practice. It's old school. If you don't, the question comes up: how do you ensure that people aren't stealing your money? How do you know where all your money went? And the same sort of control is required for your credit card account. How do you know that there aren't expenditures in there that are accurate and apply to your business? I've actually seen in my career people that didn't reconcile their bank accounts and their credit card accounts, and unscrupulous employees went in and were stealing the business blind. So that's why you do this. Next, please. Theo, next. Thank you. Petty cash. Not everybody uses petty cash, but that always leads us to say, well, how do you take care of you know, the person that needs to go down to the corner store and pick up something quick? You know, yeah, you can use your cards and everything. Most people just like to keep, you know, 25, 30 bucks around just to take care of um, uh, those small expenditures. And then the way most people handle it, and the way traditionally those things have happened, you just say there's 25, you know, a petty cash fund out there. And when all the money's gone, you take all the receipts and you book them to your bank account and you replenish the petty cash fund. Next, please. Income statements and balance sheets. These are, one tells us what the company owes and what the company has. That would be the balance sheet. And the income statement shows us how much money, whether you got a profit or a loss, and lets us know the stability. If in fact, everybody says, well, I don't know how to get that. If you're using QuickBooks, it's under reports, and you just put in the date that you want it for, and you just say run you can run the report as needed. If you're, well, you guys are all small enough that you're not getting CPA reviews, it becomes a lot easier just to, like I said, just to run it straight out of QuickBooks. I think I saw something with from the person from Sparks saying that they'll be able to help you with running that that function. The other thing about it, it's if by running your income statement, it should make making your budget versus actual reports a lot easier because all of your accounts will get summarized and it'll tell you exactly what transactions make up each of the expenditure lines. Next, please. This is the thing we were talking about earlier. This is the submission that you guys are making. I think it's quarterly is when you do your report of unemployment compensation payments. You, you probably get it in the mail. If you're not doing it online, you just print it out and you'll be able to pass it on. Next, please. Ah, yes. If you are a nonprofit, this is the quarterly federal tax return. You've probably seen it. It's kind of a given. Next, payroll summary sheet. I'm making an assumption here that you don't do your own payroll. If you have a payroll company, when they send you the payroll package, they at the end there'll be a summary of all the checks that they cut and how, when they send it off to, to pay all of the deductions to the different places and and how many employees were actually paid. And the register just does the detail of those people. Next, please. This goes back to what we were talking about. Well, I'm going to turn that one over to Theo about what the minimum is currently for the minimum wage requirement. Theo, can you handle that? Or
Yeah, I can handle it. So payroll records will be reviewed for evidence that providers are complying with the 21st century minimum wage requirements. In FY24, this was $15.71 an hour. If you aren't complying, we will be looking for evidence that this doesn't apply to you or to see if you have a waiver. A waiver needed to be submitted directly to the city if providers are unable to meet the 21st century minimum wage standard. And you'll be asked to provide a copy of the waiver and or the city's approval as applicable.
so we want to make sure that you have all your normal insurances, which are required per your contract. So if you don't, whoever your insurance provider is, should be able to give you evidence of that, and sending that in should be no problem. If you have a commercial vehicle, it I that's a very rare thing since pre-K is not paying um, for the acquisition of vehicles. But if you're operating one, we like to make sure that you have adequate coverage for that vehicle. Workman comp stuff, this is kind of self-explanatory. Just making sure that you have the bare minimums. This will all be given to you by your insurance provider or agent. Gift cards. This is always a fun one because we're not supposed to be using Philly pre-K funds to purchase gift cards. If you're using them, we'll always be asking why and are you using them to within the Philly pre-K environment? The reason we're asking for a list of employees no longer in the program is we want to make sure that we're not seeing payments to people that are no longer involved in the program. Accounting policies and procedures. This becomes a document on how you should be handling every single transaction. When you're going to enter information to your QuickBooks software, You could even put the instructions on how to generate a general ledger in there. Uh, and one of the big reasons for doing that is one, it lets us see that you have adequate controls, and two, if in fact you have any turnover in the maintenance of your accounting information, whoever comes in next can now read it instead of you having to start again from scratch. You can say, this is how we handle our financial processes here. And it just makes for a lot smoother transition. Um, this is pretty self, and this is what I was intimating about. If you use petty cash, you know, the technical term is an impressed fund, and that you set up a certain amount and then you distribute it, and when the cash fund is down to zero, you replenish it with more, and you take all the receipts that are in the box and you charge them all into the accounting fund. That way you're not doing a lot of little small transactions. I don't know why I'm seeing all these lines going across as if somebody's writing on my screen now. But oh well. Next, please. You can keep going next. It's uh, conflict of interest. Uh, it's just this is just a protection so that you know. And off the top of my head, I can't think of what would constitute a conflict of interest. But you want to have a formal uh, position on that there will be no conflict of interest, that you're protecting the program. You won't be hiring, somebody that has an adverse relationship with the program, et cetera, et cetera. I think this goes back to you, Theo.
Stop for just a moment. Does anybody have any questions? Are we going to have office hours during this period? We hadn't set up office hours, but can certainly set up like individual appointments if you have any questions that you need clarified. We're certainly happy to set up any appointments. And yes, we can send around the full list of, we'll send around after this orientation, we'll send around the recording and the slides as well. So you'll have the full list of documents that you'll need to submit. So we're asking for your general ledger first, and then after you submit that, Ken and his team will select the transactions. Then we'll make the second request from you all with the full list of documents as well in that request. Okay. So there's just a few more slides to go through. So for what happens after you submit all of those documents, so the finance team again is going to review all of your documents. They may follow up to ask you some questions about any of the information or anything that you might be missing. Then they will draft your desk review report detailing findings and next steps. Those next steps may include corrective action, additional fiscal monitoring, and a referral possibly to the Spark Quality Support Center, which you'll hear from in just a moment. But we'll also, if you do have any findings, we will meet with you. We'll talk you through the report and what those next steps are. Now we'll move on to resources, and we'll have a representative from Spark join us. I think it's going to be Tanishai.
All good. No worries. Hi all, I'm from Rex. I'm with the Spark Quality Support Center. Many of you are familiar faces and names too. I'm the Deputy Director of Content and Learning Strategy, and so beyond supporting the Spark QSC with our professional development and content solutions, I'm also been supporting with the business technical assistance regarding desk reviews. And also just really quick, if Tanisha, can you introduce yourself really quick?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Tanny Shaw Campbell, and I am the Business Support Specialist. And I am designated to help providers with their business operations as well as desk reviews and all of the fiscal deliverables that is required from PHLpreK.
Thank you. And just here on the screen, just as Carrie mentioned, the recording will go out along with the slides, is a list of some of the resources that Spark QSC does have available for all of you when it comes to either supporting with the desk review, documents that you're looking for, or even thinking about the broader business and operational pieces. In this resource list, there are also some templates and policy templates that could be a resource to all of you, especially as you're thinking about those accounting policies, procedures. So even as you're preparing for this upcoming general ledger submission, if you also want to think about some of those current business and fiscal practices, whether it's accounting policies, documentation, different fiscal systems you have in place, feel free to reach out Spark QSC. Of course, the first line of communication, you can reach out to your PHLpreK coach. Our coaches team works side by side along with Tanisha to really support any of you if you have any specific business supports need. We also do strive to maintain ongoing communication with PHMC. So we do recognize there is some confidential information when it comes to business and finances. So definitely understand if there's any point where we would defer you to Carrie and her team if there are any specific questions. And also, as she mentioned, she is open to carrying those individual appointments. Likewise with Spark QSC, we're welcome. We're open to have any initial conversation with all of you. Definitely understand this is a lot of information regarding the desk review. So some of the successes we've noticed is that when we meet with providers to really just talk through the desk review information and then having a better understanding of your business and operational pieces, then from there, we're able to really identify some tailored resources and targeted supports to really think about how do we ensure that you have high quality business operational systems in place. And I would just spotlight a few things here. Not sure if folks had a chance. Recently, McCormick Center had a webinar called Mastering Financial Management, QuickBooks Training for Tracker Providers. So for anyone of you using QuickBooks, that session was recorded and we do have the slide deck for that in case you're interested in checking that out. And there are other business trainings outside of QSC. So some folks might be familiar with Children's Village. They do have a series of business operations training. Spark QSC, we will be releasing our calendar for the year, which will include featuring of business trainings too that you could take advantage of.
Thanks so much, Rex and Tanisha. And this is also the end of our presentation. So as you move along through this process as well, if questions come up along the way, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to set up calls and talk you through some of the documents that you need to submit again as once you start getting into it.
Thank you.
Is Ms. Drummond talking? She's muted. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm not missing something.
I was just saying thank you. And you said, I got on a little late. I was on another Zoom, but we will be able to look at the slides and you guys going to be able to send it to our email if we missed anything at the beginning.
Yeah, we'll send the recording and the slides as well to the whole desk review folks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. All right, that's all we have for you today. Thanks so much for joining.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.